Sci-fi is finally safe for black nerds? I didn't know I was in any danger for the last 50 years.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spellbound, A Darker Shade of Black. Get your copy today at your favorite online bookseller.
Actress Amandla Stenberg of Star Wars Acolyte series on Disney Plus says that her show, The Acolyte, has made sci-fi safe for black nerds. Really, Amandla? You haven't heard of a show called Star Trek Deep Space Nine? Now, I get what Amandla Stenberg is talking about because as a person who's been a fan of comic books and science fiction since he was 4 years old in the late 1970s, I know that a lot of black fans get a lot of criticism from those who are not a part of fandom, and we also get a lot of heat from those whites out there and non-blacks for being a fan of science fiction and fantasy. So I understand what Amandla Stenberg is talking about as related to this subject, but it's clear to me that she really doesn't know much of what she's talking about because her show that's coming up in 2024, The Acolyte, will not make things safe for black nerds. No, it won't make anything safe at all for all of those black nerds out there. All Amandla Stenberg has found is a nice black box to fit in where she's going to be accepted by white people. And this is something I talk about in depth in my novel, Spellbound, that I wrote in 2016, because what most spellbound individuals believe is that if they play their role inside of that black box, they can go out here and secure the enforcement of a covert contract where they can receive acceptance and approval from white people. And that's what Amandla Stenberg believes she has received by being the first alphabet intersexual black feminist to be in a lead role in Star Wars, The Acolyte. She believes that because she is now fitting into the black box and meets the diversity checkmark boxes that allow her to gain acceptance and approval from white people, that sci-fi and fantasy are safe for black nerds, when in actuality, all she's done is go out here and find a nice black box to fit herself in to avoid having to deal with the things black fans and black nerds and black creators have to deal with. And what many black nerds and black fans of comics and science fiction have to deal with as related to enjoying this material over the last 50 years is, again, a lot of criticism from people in the black community for not, quote-unquote, acting black. And we also deal with a lot of hostility from whites and non-blacks whenever we go to places like Comic-Cons, or we go out here and try to go out here and enjoy different types of movies. Again, a lot of black nerds have been dealing with a hostile environment for years, and a show like The Acolyte isn't going to make sci-fi safe for black nerds, and it was not going to make anything safe for black nerds because it's just one show, the same way Star Trek Deep Space Nine was one show. And Amandla Stenberg thinking that her show is going to make everything safe because it has a quote-unquote diverse cast is completely foolish, because I remember another show that came out in the 1990s, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which had Avery Brooks, a legendary actor, as Ben Sisko, and also had Cirroc Lofton as his son. Michael Dorn was Worf on that show, and that show had an extremely diverse cast, but it didn't make sci-fi safe for black people, even though it explored a lot of issues as related to race. I mean, the show Star Trek Deep Space Nine was one of the best Star Trek shows ever made, but it never made a safe environment for black nerds. No, it created a strong, positive black male hero, showed us a black man who loved a black woman in Cassidy Yates after his wife had passed, showed a father showing love to his black son, and also showed a great Klingon warrior in Worf. Again, we had a show, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which did a lot of things as related to presenting a positive image of black people in science fiction, but it never made a safe environment for black nerds. No, I remember when I was a young man in my 20s, I used to watch Deep Space Nine when it would come on 7 p.m. on Channel 11, but it wasn't about making a safe place for me. No, as a fan of comics and science fiction, I always felt secure in myself because I always had a sense of self-confidence. Even though I was an introvert with social anxiety issues, I always just went out here and did what I wanted to do. But a TV show does not make sci-fi safe for black people. No, black fans have been out here enjoying science fiction and fantasy over the last 50 years, and we've been enjoying science fiction and fantasy even in the face of the hostilities we receive in our black communities, with a lot of people telling us we're acting white, telling us that the stories we're watching aren't real, telling us that these stories are not something that aren't cool, and then going to places like a comic shop or a Comic-Con where we're just watched regularly and then also in some cases disrespected. I mean, that's stuff that black nerds have been dealing with for years, and some black nerds, they won't go out here and stand up for themselves like I will in videos where I call this stuff out. Many of the black nerds, because they want to get white acceptance, they will want to fit into the black box that's acceptable to white people, and they'll do things like what Amandla Stenberg has said and say, oh, things are safe, which is basically them staying in denial, and as they stay in denial, they don't want to deal with the reality that sci-fi isn't so safe for black nerds as related to mainstream science fiction. No, the place that we can create to be a secure place for us, even in the face of racism, is when we create our own places for our own fantasy and science fiction. And that's what I do over here on the SJS Direct imprint, because I understand that I live in a white supremacist world, and in a white supremacist world, I have to go out here and tell my stories about the black experience, and I tell stories about the black experience because I have the confidence to go out here and tell my stories about the black experience and show you black fantasy from a black perspective. And again, my kind of stories are not about trying to get white acceptance. It's about trying to empower black people to see that they have a place in the world and that they can imagine themselves in a world where they are front and center. I want to create stories that show you a black man and a black woman at the center of a universe, because as I was watching shows like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which showed me a black man basically being the center of a part of the Star Trek world, it showed me that a black character could go out here and carry their own stories. And watching Avery Brooks's legendary performances on Deep Space Nine, that was one of the things that inspired me and motivated me to continue going out here looking to write stories like Isis and John Haynes. That watching Avery Brooks on Deep Space Nine showed me a black man could go out here and be the center of his world as related to Deep Space Nine, because Jake Sisko wasn't only the captain who ran the Deep Space Nine station, he was also the captain of the USS Defiant, a warship, and he was considered to be one of the strongest leaders in the Star Trek universe. And again, many black nerds out here were watching Ben Sisko for years on Deep Space Nine before this Acolyte show even reared its head. And this Acolyte show, which is run by the Alphabet Intersectionalist Feminist, is something that they're talking about as related to so-called diversity right now. But Deep Space Nine was doing diversity before it was even considered a trend in Hollywood, and it just did it exceptionally far better than anything I've seen. And you have Amandla Stenberg again talking about how this show is going to make sci-fi safe for black nerds. No, this show ain't going to make sci-fi safe for black nerds. No, that's up to black nerds to go out here and do for themselves by just having the confidence to just be themselves. That was something I learned back when I was 14, 15 years old. People would go out here and say that they didn't like me reading comics, but I would read my comics anyway, and I would be myself even when I was working at different jobs. I still was never ashamed to be a sci-fi and comic and fantasy fan. I was never afraid to be those things because that was a part of how I grew up when I was 4 years old, and I'm going to be 50 in September, so I've been here longer than Amandla Stenberg has been on this earth, and I know that sci-fi isn't going to be made safe by one show. No, what makes sci-fi safe is your security in yourself. When you're secure in yourself and you're secure in your passion for the shows that you like, you're going to go out here and enjoy those shows. And again, the Acolyte ain't going to make things safe for a black nerd. No, a black nerd has to go out here and work on building their self-confidence to the point where they stand up for themselves and stand up for the things that they're passionate about. That's what's going to make science fiction and fantasy safe for black nerds. That and going out here and supporting independent black fantasy like I produce on the SJS Direct imprint, because I don't really want to be a token character in the background of a white world. No, I want to go out here and create a world where black people are front and center, a world where black people are the center of the story, a world where black people are the focus of a universe, and a world where I see black people taking their power and black people looking to empower themselves. That's what I want to see. Now, this so-called Acolyte show is towards the end of the era where before the Empire took over. So again, they're promoting diversity passively by saying, oh, we've got a black series, but it's a series that's towards the end where the Empire took over. So again, this is passive-aggressive in that they're taking a shot at black people. You'll put you at the end of this era, and again, make you think you're being represented, when in actuality you're not getting any sort of representation at all. Whereas in an independent black fantasy world like the SJS Direct Universe, black people get focused front and center. We are made the center of the story, and we are in a story where we win. We don't sit there and be a part of a losing story like the Acolyte, which is again being roasted by many out here as related to the Star Wars fandom. I mean, this is a series that, while they're sitting there saying, oh, it's making it safe for black people, no, black people like myself have been watching shows since the 70s and the 80s. I mean, I have been watching sci-fi shows for years. I mean, I was watching shows since Star Trek: The Next Generation, Hercules: The Legendary Journeys, Xena: Warrior Princess, I mean, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I mean, this was a Saturday night for me, and with it being a Saturday night for me, that's why I can laugh at Amandla Stenberg and her claim that her show, The Acolyte, is going to make sci-fi safe for black nerds, because only a spellbound acolyte is going to believe this, and only a spellbound acolyte looking to fit into a black box that's acceptable to white people is going to go out here and believe her show, The Acolyte, is going to go out here and change things for black nerds, when it's up to black nerds to go out here and foster that change by supporting independent black-owned fantasy like I produce on the SJS Direct imprint. That's how you make sci-fi safe for black nerds. And sci-fi and fantasy have been becoming more safe because we've been creating our own spaces like the Schaumburg Comic Book Festival. So sci-fi and fantasy are being made safe Again, while it's unsafe out here in these hostile environments and mainstream environments, what black people are doing is creating their own environments, and that's how you work towards fostering a more safer and secure environment to be a black comic and sci-fi fan. Now, if you want to pick up some of my action-packed fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find those books in the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and my vampire novel, Eternal Night. You can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you want to pick up some of my comics on the SJS Direct imprint, like John Haynes at Death's Door, you can find that comic on Lulu.com right now in paperback. And you can also find my other comic, Esteem, No Good Deed. You can find that comic on Kindle for 99 cents. And if you want to see me be able to do more videos about comics, science fiction, and fantasy, you can, and be able to help me fund the next SJS Direct comic book, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online booksellers everywhere today. Now available on Lulu. John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at Lulu.com today. Support black-owned and black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.